Welcome! We're jumping right into a really fascinating take on biblical prophecy. The core idea is this: what if the prophetic clock has been on pause for the last 2,000 years? It's a concept that completely reframes how we look at our modern era. So let's get right into the big question our source material poses. What if God's prophetic timeline, specifically for Israel, was just put on hold? And we've all been living in that intermission for the last 2 millennia. What would that even mean? And, maybe more importantly, what happens when that clock finally starts ticking again? Well, this intermission actually has a name. In the source material, it's called the Great Gap Period. So let's break down exactly what that means and where it fits into a much, much larger timeline. Okay, so what is this gap period? The source defines it as the roughly 2,000 years that stretch all the way from the first Pentecost, the birth of the church, right up to our present day. The whole idea is that during this time, prophecies about Israel are on pause, and the text gives us this incredible metaphor. It's like a cosmic farming season, a time for God the farmer to plant seeds and gather a very specific spiritual harvest. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The source actually maps all of human history onto a prophetic week of 7 days, where each day equals 1,000 years. So as you can see, it kicks off with Jesus, the true son, arriving on day 4. Then you get days 5 and 6. That's our 2,000-year block, our gap period, the great harvest. And right at the end of day 6, that harvest is finally complete, which leads directly into day 7, a 1,000-year Sabbath of rest called the millennial kingdom. Okay, so if this 2,000-year gap period is a harvest, then there's a really obvious question, right? What exactly is being harvested? Let's dive into this crucial concept of what the source calls the first fruits. So just to be super clear, this isn't some random pause. It has a very, very specific purpose. According to this view, the whole point of this divine farming season is to cultivate and gather a special group of people, and the text calls them the first fruits. They are the entire goal of this 2,000-year harvest. So who are they, these first fruits? Well, the source says it's not just one single group. It's more like a composite of several key spiritual identities. They're the ones who reflect the image of God. They're the martyr witnesses who prove their faith. They're the sons of God, the bride of Christ, and they are the true church. And here it is. This is the trigger. The source points to a very specific number from the book of Revelation. 144,000. And the argument is that once this exact number of first fruits has been fully harvested, the 2,000-year gap period slams to a halt, and that prophetic clock starts ticking again. So this is where it all comes together. The source isn't just talking about ancient history. It's making a claim about right now. The idea is that this long gap period isn't some historical footnote. It's something that is about to end. So, what are the signs we should be looking for? The source makes a startlingly specific claim. It says that AD 2024 is the time when the 6 millennia, that's 6,000 years of history, are filled to the brim. Think of the 6 stone jars at the wedding in Cana. They were filled with water right before Jesus performed his first huge miracle. The implication here is that time is full and some kind of momentous change is right around the corner. And according to the source, there are 2 key signs that the end of this era is here. The first is a sign on earth, the condition of the church itself, which the text argues has become kind of like the church of Laodicea from Revelation, lukewarm, rich, and pretty self-satisfied. And the second is a sign in heaven, the moment when the 7 seals finally begin to be opened, which kicks off an irreversible series of judgments. Now, this is a really critical point the source makes. It's adamant that despite all the horrific wars and disasters we've seen in human history, the 7 seals have not yet been opened. And the logic is pretty simple. After every major conflict, peace has eventually returned. But the text argues that once those seals are broken, the judgments are final. They're irreversible. There's no recovery, no rebuilding, no rest until the very, very end. And this is just fascinating. The source creates this direct, one-to-one parallel between the signs Jesus gave in Matthew 24 and the opening of the 7 seals in Revelation 6. I mean, look at this. You can see how the deception of false Christs lines up perfectly with the first seal's white horse. Wars and rumors of wars corresponds to the second seal's red horse, famine to the black horse. It just goes right on down the line, creating this incredible prophetic map. So what happens when the 14,400 are finally gathered and the seals begin to open? Well, according to this interpretation, that's when the prophetic clock restarts for one final, incredibly intense countdown. This final period is called the last 1 week. And it isn't a new prophecy, it's actually the long-delayed conclusion to that famous 70-week prophecy from the book of Daniel. The first 69 of those weeks were completed way back in ancient history, and then the clock stopped. This final week represents the last 7 years, and it's set to begin the very moment that 2,000-year gap ends. The source lays out a very clear and, let's be honest, a very intense sequence of events for this final 7-year week. It starts with a great apostasy, a massive falling away within the church. That's followed by the appearance of a figure called the man of lawlessness. This figure is then given authority for 42 months, that's 3.5 years, to persecute believers in what's known as the Great Tribulation. And the whole thing culminates in the return of Jesus Christ, who defeats this figure and brings the era to a dramatic close. But after all that turbulence, the prophecy doesn't end in destruction. It actually ends with the ultimate resolution. According to the source, a brand new beginning for the world is about to be inaugurated.
Everything builds to this moment, the sound of a 7th trumpet. And that sound signals the end of the final conflict. At that instant, the 70-week prophecy of Daniel, which was paused for 2,000 years, is finally and completely fulfilled. The entire prophetic story, with its long intermission, is resolved.
The result is the dawn of a totally new era. We see a first resurrection, specifically for the martyr witnesses. They are said to reign with Christ for 1,000 years, while Satan is judged and bound. And this just ties everything together so perfectly. It kicks off the 7th prophetic day we talked about earlier. It's that 1,000-year Sabbath of divine rest and peace, the millennial kingdom. And all of this brings us to the final, really provocative question the source leaves us with. It takes this whole discussion out of ancient texts and complex timelines and drops it right in our laps. If this interpretation is right, where are we on this cosmic clock? Are we at the very end of the 6th day? Is the harvest almost complete? Are we standing right on the brink of that final week? That is the question to ponder.